Okay, let's focus.
This isn't focused.
No, no, this is
It's kind of similar to what we do on the podcast, except,
I know we actually have to talk about podcast shit.
well, we can talk about Star Wars and Mario,
hmm
but we just have to make it an extended metaphor about writing.
Okay, you think about that. I'm gonna do our opening, okay?
Hi, I'm Maddie,
And I'm Abigail, and this is
two writers.
Many Wrongs. Two writers, many lessons. Today, we wanted to take a second to look back and talk about things we wish we had known when we started our writing journeys. I feel like Maddie and I are finally both in a place where we feel maybe a little bit in control or a little bit like we know what we're doing, but not, she's shaking her head like absolutely not. But we do have more knowledge than we once had. So I kind of want to play that game of like, if you could go back and tell your, however old, for me, it would be like my 16-year-old self, uh, kind of those keys to be further ahead than I am right now, what would you tell yourself? So that's kind of what I want to do today. We're not allowed to give our past selves fashion advice. We're not allowed to give them like, don't talk to this person advice, which would be great for me. We're going to limit it to writing.
I see, I see. Thanks for setting the parameters.
Yeah.
I think this episode's been a long time coming.
hmm
The name of this podcast, in case you didn't know, is Two Writers, Many Wrongs. So this whole podcast is
hmm
about kind of what we wish we had known, like all the mistakes we've made along the way. And I think this will be kind of like a culmination of the
hmm
theme of our podcast.
Yeah.
I am kind of interested in what your fashion sense was when you were 16 that
Oh
makes you
my
feel
God.
that way.
Oh my God. I'm just gonna say I wore rain boots as regular boots.
I mean, practical. You're in
Practical.
Florida.
Yep. Most often with a pleated skirt and a vest. I really was aiming for the like punk rock meets twee. I think that's what it's called. The like Zooey Deschanel kind of
Yeah.
vibes.
Sounds
Um,
like a theater kid.
Basically a theater kid who wasn't in theater. I was in band, so
Oh my
it
gosh.
was rough. It was rough. I'm not gonna
Theater kid by
lie.
proxy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, theater
Um,
kid without the talent.
yeah, let me think. When I was in high school, I always wore Beatles t-shirts.
Oh
All
my
of my
God.
t-shirts had the Beatles on them. I would wear
Oof.
like knee-length skirts in various colors. And I had Converse on. They're
hmm
black Converse that said like the Beatles and then had the Beatles names written on it.
So do you like the Beatles music or something? Like
I was obsessed. My entire room was like everything was covered in Beatles memorabilia. My aunt walked in and she's like, "This looks like my room when I was 16 in the
Oh,
60s."
funny. You had Beatlemania.
Yeah, I had Beatlemania. I did like hardcore.
I love how this has nothing to do with writing. And
Well, we have to.
these are just the mistakes that we've made as people, and not so much
I
as
would not say that
writers.
was a mistake.
Oh, honey.
I would not say that because like my that's like one of the things that got me and Josh together was our
Oh,
shared
really?
like weird obsession with the Beatles when we were teenagers. Yeah.
Okay, not a mistake at all then, because
That's
Josh is
why I said it's not a
amazing and
mistake because
perfect.
like we were at a when we first met we this is I promise we're gonna end the sidebar and talk about
hmm
real stuff. But I asked him who his favorite musician was and he said Paul McCartney.
Hell
And
yeah.
and I texted my mom that and my parents were so convinced that he knew like somebody had like told him
Oh
and that
my
he was lying.
gosh.
And then I went back to his childhood room and it looked like my childhood room because it had Beatles
Oh,
memorabilia everywhere. So you know.
that's really cute.
So it was not a mistake.
Yeah.
I was my weird self, and it helped me find my
Your
person.
your person.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. I need that to be the message by the end of this episode. I'm gonna need you to have that optimistic spirit of like all the missed opportunities I had for my writing career all happened for a reason because I'm about to get some kind of huge book deal or something. Like I need you to bring that same energy to all the other mistakes I've made.
Right. I will do my best because I always do try to reframe things as like they're just
Yeah.
steps along the way. They're
Yeah.
stepping stones. So, you said that you began your writing journey like taking it really seriously when you were 16.
Yeah, so I mean, we talked about a little bit before, kind of like our earliest publishings and stuff like that. And so my high school had a literary journal that I applied to my freshman year, and we already talked about. I got some poems in there and stuff. But by the time that I became a senior, that club had been closed, or that class had been shut down. And I really wish that I had had the like forethought to go talk to the teacher and say like, hey, can we put this together as a club? Can we do something else? Like, and try to like revive it in some way. Because I think that that would have really looked good, not just on a resume, but given me any kind of experience. Because to me, that's really the name of the game, is the lack of experience that I have, or had, and having to spend so much of my own time figuring things out because I didn't have the teachers and mentors showing me these things outside of just the actual words on a page.
Hmm.
Like to me, that's the reoccurring theme that I have is so many people are like, oh, well, I had this mentor who got me into this program who, showed me how to do this, how to, and I had great mentors when it came to my actual writing and storytelling, but there was nobody who helped me figure out how to get it from the page into people's
Hmm.
hands. And so like that was like my first opportunity where I was, a high schooler and was like, I don't know, it closed down, nothing I can do about it. Oh well, and went and took AP German or some shit. So what about you? Where would you go back to tell your past self, like, here are some things that you can do?
I don't know because I think I might go even further back than that because I was writing from a very young age.
I
Like,
mean, I was writing from a much younger age, but where I feel like I could have actually gotten a leg up for me was 16.
yeah, no, I understand that. It's just
Yeah.
there were opportunities when I was way younger that
Yeah.
I never took because I didn't, I felt like my writing was a secret. I didn't want people
Mm.
to know. I was embarrassed to show it to people. And so I had lots of
Hmm.
opportunities where like, kids were submitting to contests and, like my husband has a poem published that he wrote when he was like 8.
Aw.
And so like there were opportunities like that I didn't really take because
Hmm.
it was like a secret thing that I did. And I had teachers that were like, wow, you're a writer, you're going to be a novelist someday.
Hmm.
And like would say that stuff to me. And then I would still like hide my writing and I wouldn't show it. And teachers were always asking me to like, oh, will you read this out loud? And I'm like, I will absolutely never read this out loud. I'd rather set it on
Aw.
fire. So I think there's like these younger versions of me like to stop being so afraid
Hmm.
of sharing.
Yeah.
Because like, it was like very young, like in kindergarten. I remember this girl came in. I've told the story a little bit before, but she
Hmm.
wrote a book
This
with the help
bitch.
of her mom. And I wrote a story too. In
Hmm.
like conversation with that story, it'll be like, I could write a story.
Hmm.
But I didn't, she just came in and was like, hey, I wrote a book, let me share it. And I wrote a book too. And then
Yeah.
I didn't share it.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't know why. Like I was always just so afraid of like
Hmm.
social rejection, I think. And so I think that's a message I would go back. And I know that's not
Hmm.
necessary. It is very connected to writing for me. It's
Hmm.
like just stop being so afraid to put your work
Hmm.
out there and
Yeah.
take those opportunities. Because like I
Hmm.
kept getting opportunities to write. Like I was on the school newspaper in 6th grade.
Same.
And so like I had opportunities to write. I had
Mhm.
teachers telling me that I was a good writer. I had teachers telling me like that I was the best like
Mm.
essays in the class and stuff like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
So like
Getting
I
six on that FCAT writes.
hell yeah.
Yeah.
And just being told over and over again, hey, you're really good at writing, and then being like, I don't know, I'm probably really bad. Nobody cares what I have to say, and just kind of just
Yeah.
wanting to like like gently shake my shoulders and be like, get over yourself.
Yeah.
Just write.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
show you're writing to other people because
Hmm.
you're gonna regret that when you grow up, like I do now.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's one of the things that I struggled with to a much lesser degree because, I talked about my poetry is bad. My poetry was melodramatic, 13, 14-year-old. I mean, rough. So I definitely think that there was part of like the having to get over that kind of thing. But I was really, really lucky in that my family knew that I wanted to be a writer and were very encouraging of that. Now, did they make fun of some of the shit that I wrote? Absolutely. And like that hurt sometimes. But my mom always made it pretty clear that like she thought it was cool. She was like, this is something I can't do. I would love to be able to do this. I just can't. Um, and, my uncle always kind of had like fancies of being a writer and stuff like that. So it was almost one of those like, not your parents like putting it on you to like live out their dream, but
Mhm.
more so like oh, my kid's interested in this thing that I've always been interested in. I really want to like push her to stick with it because I didn't, you
Yeah.
know? So like, I wish I could go back and tell myself, don't rely so much on teachers, like do some of the work yourself. Because when I was a senior in high school, um, my English teacher helped me submit a nonfiction short story piece that, got selected for like second place in the county and all that kind of stuff. And I just kind of assumed, like, oh, if there are more opportunities, she would have told me. And, moving forward, like, oh, if there are opportunities, the people who are supposed to be looking out for me would encourage me
Mhm.
to do that. And I really kind of like sat around. And I truly believe that's why I got rejected from grad school the first time, is
Yeah.
because I didn't know how to find places to get published. I had applied to my school literary magazine, but you can only do it once a year. Um, and I always got rejected. So I kind of had that feeling of like my writing's not good enough, but also I don't even know how to go about trying to get this published.
Yeah. I think publishing was always a mystery to me. I didn't even know
Hmm.
how to do it until my fiction two class when I was a junior in college.
Hmm.
There was an assignment that you had to submit to a magazine and
Hmm.
send the email of your submission to prove that you did it.
Yeah.
And so that was the first time that I'd ever even knew about that process.
Hmm.
And I got rejected because I think I
Right.
picked Clark's World magazine, which is like the premier
Amazing.
sci-fi
Yeah.
one. And it's like,
Yeah.
it was a short story. I knew that wasn't even ready, but I had to
Hmm.
submit it.
Right.
Um,
But honestly, I kind of love that your teacher did that, knowing that most people are going to get rejected and kind of like get the first one over with, you
yeah,
know?
no, it was a really good, I'm really glad to have the opportunity because that really was the first time I had no idea about publishing short stories at
Hmm.
all until
Yeah.
that class. And then it gave me some idea. But then I still had so many questions about, well, how do I find these journals and how do I
Right.
know when it's ready and what
Hmm.
journals are good to send to, which ones are bad to send to, et cetera, et cetera. So I just kind of,
Yeah.
didn't do anything again because I that rejection really hurt. And I knew that I
Hmm.
was going to get rejected, but it really hurt. And so
Yeah.
I always self-reject, and that's
Hmm.
the problem I've always had with my writing. So when I got that rejection, it was like, see, you're right. Nobody likes
Yeah.
your stuff. But it's
Yeah.
just not the
Yeah.
case.
I feel like another thing I just going off of that like I wish I would have known and just listening to you talk about it, I wonder if you do the same thing. There are times that I'll send something out knowing it's not ready so that when I get the rejection, I can be like, you know what? It's because I didn't even try that hard. Like it's not to like try to protect yourself. And it's like, no, I need to stand behind my work like 10 toes down. And that's something I still really struggle with, like with querying my current novel. I constantly am thinking to myself, like, well, it's not really that marketable. And like, I don't know who would actually read it. And like, that confidence is really fucking hard to build.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think that is a mark of perfectionism is to kind of make
Hmm.
those excuses up as like, oh, well, I mean, I could have done better. So that's why I got rejected because it's
Right.
a way of it's protecting yourself. And
Exactly.
I've definitely been guilty of that. I try not to,
Hmm.
but because I get really happy when I get to a point where I send something out because I
Yeah.
do sit on things for a really long time and then I'm like, I guess I
Yeah.
could try.
Hmm.
And then it gets rejected. And I'm like, see,
It was too early. Shouldn't have done it. Yeah.
it's too early. It's never ready. It's never going to be ready. It's never gonna be
Exactly.
perfect. I'm not a good enough writer for this.
Yeah. One thing kind of going along those lines that I wish I would have done more or wish I would have known about. So when I was in college, I did join, there was something, so the Williams building on Florida State campus is like where the English department is.
Okay.
So there was the Williams Writing Workshop group, which as somebody who had a speech impediment as a child and couldn't say her
Rough.
R's, it was rough. Like every time I would be like, oh yeah, I'm going to the Williams writing workshop, And like it was a group, there were probably between like 6 to 8 of us that would meet on a like semi-regular basis, but we didn't do anything. Like there wasn't really a leader in the group that knew what they were doing. And even though we had a teacher sponsor, they didn't show up. It was just like a, yep, I'm aware that you guys are there. Don't get in trouble because then I'll get in trouble kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, and so I wish that I hadn't been afraid of being bossy because that's something that I had kind of been not reprimanded for, made fun of, I guess, for being very assertive. Like it's still a running joke in my family of like my daughter is very bossy and everyone's like, "Oh, I wonder where she gets that from." I'm like, "Well, good. She should speak up for herself." But just not to me, because that's really bothering me.
Yeah.
Um, but no, so like I wish that I had maybe taken more control of that group and said like, "Hey guys, this is what we should be doing." But I also didn't know what we should be doing at the time.
Yeah.
I was at that point just trying to make any kind of connections with a writing community. But, we would go and do like board games. Like we were so focused on the idea of growing that we didn't actually workshop anything. And like specifically, I wish that I had practiced reading my work out loud, like going to open mic nights or um, you know, just reading to that group of people where it was like a safe environment, because that's something I still really, really struggle with is standing up there. Like I can send off a short story to somebody and be like, "Hey, read this in your own time. I don't have to watch your reaction." But standing up reading in front of people is so hard.
Yeah, it's something I was super excited about having the opportunity to do in grad school because
Hmm.
that was something that they talked about is that they would do
Hmm.
open mic nights.
Yep.
But because of COVID happening during my program, we didn't have that, and they'd kind of stopped them. I remember
Yeah.
the first semester we made like an ad hoc one where there was like five of us, and we just
Yep.
like stood in this room and did it. And it
Yeah.
was the first time I read my work out loud,
Mm.
and it was really scary.
Hmm.
And I looked at the paper the entire time. I barely looked
Yeah.
at the audience, but I never had another opportunity to do that. Even
Hmm.
um, like I remember watching you stand up there and read your thesis, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to do that. And I
Oh
didn't
my God, I was
get that.
shaking so hard.
I
Yeah.
didn't get to do that. So,
Yeah. Well, and even just in the time that I was in the grad program, my first semester, we were in like not like a banquet hall. It wasn't that big, but there were several like big tables that people could sit at, and there was like tapas being like catering there, and you could go up and like read, and it was more of an event, like you had to sign up
yeah.
for it and everything ahead of time, and then by the time my last semester came around, I'm trying to think because my last semester was your first semester. So maybe, yeah, maybe they didn't have one. I remember the last one that we did was in like the Spartan Club or whatever it is. So it was a much, much, much smaller space. And it was more like the students threw it together than like the program threw it together.
Yeah, it was the same
Um,
thing for us. It was in the Spartan
yeah.
Club, but there were literally five people that went.
Anyway, that was my open mic night experience at grad school. And the writing group that I'm in right now, they try to do like they call it reading in the round once a month, but I've just never really been able to make it work or, to be there.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know. I always feel like I have to get so much context because I'm writing a novel. So I'm like, what's the point of reading it out loud to just do like part of a chapter, you know?
I mean, I think it is valuable.
Yeah. I
but it
know
is,
it's valuable. I just, my brain's being like, you don't need to do that.
yeah, you're like protecting yourself. Like, oh, I'm right that I don't need to read this.
Exactly.
But anyway, so I think so far we've talked about uh, maybe putting ourselves out there a little more,
Hmm.
taking more ownership of our
Yeah.
writing and our journey as writers,
Hmm.
and not to self-reject.
Yeah. Yeah. I think ownership is a great word. I was going to say autonomy, but it's not even autonomy. It really is ownership. I kept pushing it off to my mentors of like, oh, they'll find me opportunities rather than asking the questions of, what do I need to know moving forward? So I really like that idea of taking ownership of not just your writing, but your writing journey and your writing career,
Hmm.
and taking ownership of your goals and figuring out how do I get to that goal.
Yeah, I think along my writing journey, something that really helped me was I started a Tumblr blog
Aw.
in which I published a lot of my poetry
Hmm.
and some short stories, and a novella. I
Hmm.
was posting it in sequence, and I had quite a few followers, and I had people who would like repost it, and I
Hmm.
had people that would be like, "Man, I really, really relate to this," and I had somebody who was like really a huge fan of my novella, and like every time I posted a new chapter, they'd be like, "Guys, this is really amazing. You need to be checking this out."
That's
And
amazing.
and so these were really cool moments that I like realized
Hmm.
that there are people out there that would be interested in what I have to say. And that was hard to put my work out there and kind of shout into the void for
Hmm.
a bit. But I found out that there was an audience, and maybe not a super big audience, but there were some people that
Hmm.
resonated with it. And that was very meaningful for me because I always felt like what's the point? Why am I doing
Hmm.
this? But I felt the need to do it anyway. And that kind
Yeah.
of showed me that there are people willing to read the wacky sci-fi adventures that I write.
Yeah. I'm so surprised and I'm so proud of you to hear that, because even though Tumblr, I'm sure there was a certain level of anonymity um, for that posting and stuff like that. That's really incredible that you were posting a serialized story and putting yourself out there in that way. Because the most that I ever did was, again, I was much more comfortable sharing nonfiction and kind of that tongue-in-cheek sort of thing than sharing my actual like creative side. So, when I like would travel, I would do like travel blogs
Mm,
and post about, what was happening, all that kind of stuff. But that was knowing that like the people who were reading it. So like I had the opportunity to go to Germany with my German club the summer before my senior year of high school.
mhm.
And so all of the parents were following my blog because I would update daily of like what we did that day. And that was back when you still had to like buy a phone card to like call back home and stuff. And so literally this group of 25 kids, all of their parents were reading this blog.
Oh,
So like it wasn't, you know, actually putting myself out there in any way. There was a built-in audience. I knew it was reporting rather than being creative. So I'm really, really impressed with you that you did that. Like that's awesome.
well, thank you. I mean, I was also, it was a time in my life when I was very lonely.
Hmm.
So it was just me and Bailey, and I didn't really have a lot of friends at that time that I was
Hmm.
close with. And so I was really, really alone. And so it really helped me find a community
Yeah.
and people to talk to and hang out with and who were interested in me just
Hmm.
with the words that I had to say. And that was like the first time that like people were like getting to know me through my writing versus in some other way. And I always feel like my writing is more authentic
Hmm.
than
Yeah.
sometimes I can be.
No, I understand. We definitely both put that shield up,
Yes.
when we're
Hmm.
in person. Um, my second novel, I have no problem. I'm like, you can read it and you can read it and you can read it. My first novel, I know how personal it is to me, and I'm like, I'm still scared to share it with people, even though I'm literally querying agents with it right now, you know?
Yeah. Um, so craft things.
Hmm.
Because we talked a lot about like the really like
The
emotional
journey, yeah.
a component of what we did wrong. I mean, not necessarily wrong, but it was part of
No,
our journey that
again, just things we wish we knew.
things we wish we knew. But if we want to go back and talk more mechanically, talk about
Yeah.
craft. What
Hmm.
are some craft things that you feel like maybe it took you longer than necessary to figure out?
Yeah. Um, I really think like the scale and scope of storytelling
Hmm.
is something that I was lucky enough to get relatively early in college, but like it's one of those key fundamental things that I had never really thought about before then. And so I kind of wish that I had gotten that information maybe a little bit sooner or like paid attention to it more
Hmm.
because I was always that kid who, you'd get like a free write and I would start at the very, very, very beginning of the day and be like, how am I supposed to do this in 500 words? Instead of focusing on like, okay, you have 500 words. What's the most important thing? And now you have 1,000 words. How can you scale it up? And now you have 2,000 kind of thing. So I think that's a really invaluable skill that
Hmm.
I didn't get because I didn't read short stories growing up. I just read novels.
Mm. Side note though, that's a really good like writing exercise.
Oh yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, because really, so I do that. I literally took this assignment from one of my undergrad teachers, which is you have 500 words to tell five like story seconds, five narrative seconds. What are you telling? Like, what can you actively do in 5 seconds? And it was really interesting. There was one kid who wrote about starting his motorcycle and like
Okay.
just the ignition. I wrote about a shuttle launch being scrubbed because they call it in that last 3 seconds, you know? Um, but no, it's a really interesting thing that I had never thought about before that
Hmm.
now I think about every single time I start a
Yeah.
story, you know?
I love that. That's really cool. I
What about
love
you?
that. Let me think. I think for me, craft wise, I was always trying to, a lot of people look down on sci-fi or
Yeah.
genre writing. So
Hmm.
I was always trying to write what I thought I was supposed to be writing.
Hmm.
And it always felt a little inauthentic.
Yeah.
And so one semester, it was actually that Fiction 2 class, the one that I submitted to
Hmm.
Clark's World magazine. It was the first time I fully delved in. I was like, we are an alien. She looks like a fish. And
Good
like,
for
this is her
you.
story.
Yeah.
And like, nobody was like, this is so weird why you're writing about aliens.
Hmm.
Everybody took the story very seriously
Hmm.
and didn't act like it was any different than like a more, literary type
Yeah.
of, it, you know. And so I think that's something it took me a long time to learn that if the writing is good, if the writing is solid, that people
Yep.
aren't going to care that your main
Hmm.
character has fins. That's,
Yeah.
and you can quote me on that.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I think that that's one of those basic things of like, if the writing is good, you can break whatever rule you want.
Mhm.
And I do think that that's something. I think that it's better now than when we were in school, but I do think that there's still that romanticizing of pain in the literary
Mhm.
community. And, I almost wish that we had talked to Lexi about this a little bit more because she said that the idea of the Silly Goose Press is founded on like silly, happy stories. And, you know, I love to write YA when I had started writing. Like that was my bread and butter was YA, but it was so looked down upon
Yeah.
as like children's stories. Um, one of the people that we talked about this with Kristen Harmel, one of the people that I think it was Kristen Harmel anyway, that I started grad school with wrote romance and like was so embarrassed to be writing romance. And now romance is the number one like selling genre. It's huge.
Yeah. It's almost like there's this kind of thing like, oh, if you're writing something, this sounds like it's going to make money.
Right.
Oh,
Yes.
you are
Yes.
not one of us. Like there's
Exactly.
something because it is the
Hmm.
romanticism of pain because you want your
Hmm.
story to be like really gritty and
Hmm.
like really metaphorical about the tissue that fell on the table and how it's representative of your relationship.
Yes.
And but you also have to suffer as your art
Yes.
has to suffer, but you
Hmm.
also have to suffer. You can't be making money.
Yep.
You have to be poor and starving, or you're like
Exactly. Yeah.
not doing it right.
Well, and there are so many instances that like I'm just thinking of right now. So one, talking to TJ Klune about his writing of queer joy,
Hmm.
because again, so often the stuff that sells are those trauma stories. But on top of that, I'm thinking about, do you remember the big scandal that happened? I think the book was called A Million Little Pieces. And it was about addiction recovery, and the person marketed it as nonfiction, and it was an entirely fictionalized story. And like they went on Oprah, and like she put her book club seal on it and whatever, and much later it came out that like it was all a lie, which like really it was all fiction. But the fact that they had to sell it as nonfiction because people are so much more interested in the author suffering. We put fucking Hemingway up on a goddamn pedestal because he had such a miserable alcoholic existence and blah blah blah. And I really, really feel like that seeps into so many literary programs of what we consider to be worthwhile literature,
Yes.
which is bullshit. Like, I do. I wish that I could tell my younger self, you're allowed to write happy things. You're allowed to write silly things. It doesn't all have to be super emotional, serious, coming of age,
Yeah.
bullshit.
Yeah, and I also don't want to like make people feel bad if that's the kind of stuff that they write. It's
Oh,
just being
absolutely.
pigeonholed and being forced. I think you
Yes.
something that I learned, and this is too a little bit more emotional, but to like write from your heart, write what it
Yeah.
is that you want to write. Don't try and fit into what somebody else wants because it'll come
Hmm.
out as inauthentic
Yeah.
in your writing, and you'll feel like there's
Hmm.
something missing here, and it won't ever feel right because
Yeah.
you're boxing yourself in some way.
Yeah.
But I think like write what you want to write. So it could be really happy, it could be really silly, you
Hmm.
could have sci-fi. I mean, I write my stories are usually pretty like sad or dark in some way,
Yeah.
but um, they're sad and dark, but they're like in like a
Hmm.
weird sci-fi space kind of.
Right.
That's my
Yeah.
vibe, but everybody has
Hmm.
different vibes and there's a place for it. There's always going to be magazines that have that specific
Yeah.
vibe that you're looking for. So don't feel like you have to write in this particular way for it to be
Hmm.
valid.
Yeah. And I will say a lot of my work does have like a very deep emotional poignancy that, is maybe a little melancholic, but like it's it's where the story was meant to go, not where I was trying to force it to go.
Yes.
And I think that was the big difference when I was writing in college and younger is I mean, the first like novel that I ever wrote in seventh grade, it was a whole thing about a brother who overdoses, and this girl goes on a mission to find the dealer who did it and like it's really, really melodramatic and like not I wrote it because I felt like that was the thing I was supposed
Yeah.
to be writing was these really big, important instead of like the fun little stories that I wanted to write about a girl having friends,
Yeah.
you know?
The first novel I ever wrote was called Sherlock Bones, and it was about an anthropomorphic bloodhound who solved mysteries about missing treats and dog toys.
That's so cute.
That was the first novel I ever wrote. I was in
See,
fourth grade, maybe.
and that's what should be out there. Like that is such happy fun. And here's the funny thing is that I was writing these melodramatic pieces while reading Sister of the Traveling Pants. You know what I mean? Um, but there's something so glorified about like the sadness of a writer and the suffering that they've been through. It's the whole like write what you know, but if all you know is a small town life, then you need to get out and get real life
Yeah,
experience,
yeah, that
you
too.
know? Um, so yeah, I do. I wish that I could tell my past self like you're allowed to write like happy things. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of what else on like a craft level because it's hard because the craft level stuff I think comes with
Sure.
education.
Yeah,
So while I'd love to tell my 16-year-old self like this is how you write better dialogue, that's information that I got in college. So I don't feel like it's something that I'm struggling with,
yeah. I mean,
you know.
there's a lot of stuff that I learned post grad school about writing.
Oh yeah, like what?
Um, of course, now
Sorry.
you ask it, now my brain's like, what? I don't think I have like. a
Yeah.
specific craft thing, but it's like
Hmm.
stuff that I'm like, wow, I had
Yeah.
no idea. Like, just reading a ton of books and seeing stuff
Hmm.
that I was never really taught about in school. Because let me think. So, trying to think of a specific example.
Hmm.
One thing I didn't really learn about in school was how to accurately write um, point of view.
Yes. Oh my God, yes.
And I recently didn't like it was something, it's one of those things where you're like, I know this is in third person and something is weird, but you're not really sure what it
Hmm.
is. But it wasn't
Hmm.
until much later, actually, reading like editing books and hearing the term head hopping
Hmm.
and then being able to be like, that's what's wrong because this is from this person's perspective. And now we have this random character pop in and we know
Yes.
their thoughts. And it's like the
Hmm.
whole story has been told in this point of view, so we wouldn't know, that person would
Hmm.
know what they were thinking. And so stuff like that, I see it all the time in published books. And
Yeah.
it's something that like I was never really taught to like when you're
Hmm.
in this point of view, you're only seeing this. I mean, like maybe like very briefly, but it wasn't ever like
Right. Yeah.
concretely defined.
Hmm. Well, and in grad school, I had a mentor who tried to tell me that my novel, she's like, you really need to just pick one person's point of view. And I was like, no, like it's dual POV. And she's like, okay, well then every time you switch perspectives, you need to have a chapter break. And I'm like, no, like I'm not gonna make a chapter break in the middle of a scene. And I wish, because I just read a book that does exactly what my book does,
Hmm.
where it is a limited, like third person view of just these two characters, but it switches back and forth between them, very free flow. And so I wish that I had had that vocabulary to advocate for myself of like, no, this can be done and it can be done successfully. I think that POV is something that's really not talked about at all in school.
No, yeah, POV is
Hmm.
definitely something that I had to read a lot of books.
Yeah.
Um, because like I think Game of Thrones is a book that I read that taught me a lot about
Hmm.
structure and writing, the type of story I wanted to tell. I felt
Yeah.
like it was the best example of handling such a huge cast of characters
Hmm.
and still making it interesting, switching between like people who are like not even, because
Yeah.
it's like, oh, you can't have this character in there unless they are actively in the group of people. And it's
Right.
like, well, no, Game of Thrones has
Hmm.
Daenerys who's on a different continent. It has
Right.
nothing to do with what's happening over here, but you're still interested in her story because it is tangentially related. And
Exactly.
so so that is, read, 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 read
Read.
books because
Yes.
I learned so much reading books and thinking of
Hmm.
things and like I never thought
Hmm.
of structuring it the way that this book is
Hmm.
structured because my book went through a ton of different structures. I started doing like I was structuring it by place, I was structuring it by time, and then when I was reading Game of Thrones and I saw it was just like this is Daenerys chapter, this is Tyrion's chapter, this is
Hmm.
Cersei's chapter. I was like, that's so simple, but that's how I need to
Yeah.
format my book. And wasn't taught that. I had to
Hmm.
read that.
Well, and I'm going to say the other thing I wish that I had taught myself or could go back and tell myself is not just read books. Books, I got down reading lots of books, but I can see on your shelf behind you, and I know for a fact it's on my shelf right there, the O. Henry Prize stories or the Best American Short Fiction, or I have a collection of these books that I just haven't read and I keep buying them. But that above all else, I wish that I had spent more time reading short stories and looking and paying attention to who published them.
Mhm.
Because I think that would have been hugely beneficial, not just to study craft, because as you and I have already talked about, short story craft takes so much time and is so intricate. And I truly believe that learning to write short stories makes you such a better writer in anything else that you do. I really wish I had taken the time to read more short stories,
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, as
which I know
somebody
you do already. You
I
enjoy reading short
love, I
stories.
love where I love reading short stories.
Yeah.
And I think too that has a lot to do with when I was in school, we would read them like in our literature class. We would have a
Hmm.
book, like
Yeah.
a big old thick textbook, and it was just
We
short
would do that
stories.
too. I just never read them after that. I never read them in my free time.
I I felt like those stories stuck with me longer than some of the novels I read in school.
Mm.
And so I never really thought about like, oh, reading short stories. But I'm like, no, those stories meant so much to me. I would spend so much time thinking about them more so than the
Hmm.
novels we read. And I'm like, it makes sense. I've always loved short stories. And so like going and actually just reading collections is really good. I
Yeah.
think short stories are a really good thing to read even if you don't really have an interest in writing short stories,
Yep.
because you get to see the structure of the
Hmm.
story in a much smaller scale, and it's easier for your brain to wrap
Yeah.
around like how a story starts, what the kind of beats are in the middle, and how it ends. And all those little craft elements are in a much smaller contained group that's easier for you to reread and study than it would be to see it in a novel.
And I think that that was basically my mentality at the time is I had this idea of, oh, well, I'm writing novels, so I need to be reading novels. And I didn't, even though I studied them in class, I was just kind of like, oh, that's an academic practice. I don't actually need this in my real life. Until, of course, it got to grad school and I had to apply to all these literary journals to try and get published to put them on my resume to get into school. Um, it was one of those things where I kind of took advantage or I took it for granted. Um, and I really wish that I had taken that more seriously and read more short stories. I'm saying this as if I can't do it now, but I also know that I'm not going to. Like I want to. I don't
I
know that I will.
I quit. I
I'm
quit. I can't.
sorry.
Like, just it hurts my heart. See,
Sorry. You know what would help me?
what?
Honestly, you know what would help me is I'm looking at your shelf. If we read the short stories together and could talk about them, because I'm not going to read them on my own and analyze them on my own. But I think even that moment right there of there's going to be things that I'm going to continue to learn and grow. And even though there are so many things that I wish I had known when I got started, I know that once I go through like the publishing process, there's going to be a million things there that I wish that I had known. It's the same thing with like when I got married. There were so many things about my wedding that like I wish I had known going into it, but I also know that if I had known those things, there would have just been new things that I would make mistakes with, you know?
Yeah, I think there's always
We're
going to be
we're never going to
mistakes.
know everything.
Yes, and you continue, and I think that's something too to learn. Like, there's never going to be a point in your writing career where, yes, I know everything there is to know about
Hmm.
writing. It's an iterative process where you're going to continue to learn and grow as a writer as you read, as you learn from other writers and talk to other writers. It's just kind of you're a
Hmm.
lifelong student
Yeah.
of this craft.
I think my biggest thing that I wish that I had known back in the day is exactly what you and I are still striving to do, which is community. And, that's always the bottom line after every single one of our episodes is that feeling of wanting community and trying to build community. But I really think that since I joined, specifically our writing community, but even just trying to jump into bigger ones is
Mhm.
where so much useful information has come. And that's where you get to talk to people who, oh, you're already in the querying process. Well, what did you do? And what did you wish you did differently? And oh, you've already had two short stories published. Well, how did you figure out where to send them to? And that element was something that I always missed, and I really wish that I had made more of an effort to join a writing community because I think I could have really easily. I know that they're out there. I just didn't know how to find them and didn't think I could find them.
Yeah, I think another thing too is writers and are a lot of times kind of pitted against each other. Like it's a
Yes.
competition, like
Hmm.
who's gonna get published. Like somebody else writing is a sign that you're not gonna get your writing published.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the narrative that was pushed to me. So like community
Hmm.
was something that it felt like it didn't feel like a thing. It felt
Yeah.
like these aren't my people who are going to help and
Hmm.
encourage me. These are people that I have to stand above, that I have
Yeah.
to be better than. And I think that's a very toxic narrative that I
Hmm.
grew up hearing. And I think that most writers want to help other writers succeed, want
Yeah.
to be there with each other because we know what this journey is like. And
Hmm.
we're all doing something different. I mean, you and I
Hmm.
are writing completely different genres, so you're
Yeah.
not my competition. And
Hmm.
even the people that are writing the same genre as me are not my competition.
Yeah.
We're like yes
Peers.
and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yes. And I think that we are in a time right now where we're coming out of some of like the white male egocentric literature. which I do think is making it a more open and inclusive and inviting space.
Yes.
And, I think that so much of that is because of things like TikTok and book talk. And, there's always going to be people who write off, oh, girls like it. It's not that serious. Or, oh, that's just, smutty romance. Or, oh, that's what. But when I look at the bookshelves of the fiction section, there are so many female authors. And when you look at who's actually reading books, it's mostly women.
Hmm.
And I think that now that we finally started acknowledging that it has become a much more inclusive space. Because I agree, that was the narrative when we were coming up was, writing is a lonely process. You're only in it for yourself, and, you can't count on anybody else. And
Yeah.
that's just not true.
No, thankfully it's not. Thankfully there's
Yes.
community. Thankfully,
Yep.
and there was some toxicity. Like when I went to grad
Mm,
school, there was like a lot of people who felt like they deserved to be there, but not everybody else deserved to be there. And so they
yep.
would that would come out a lot in workshop was be
Hmm.
like, I can't believe they got into this program. And when they're writing
Right.
about spaceships, like,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
and, but
Yeah.
that's not the community we want to build. And you
Mm-mm.
get to build your own community. And if you feel like the community you're in is toxic, I think that's a good sign to walk away and find a better community that's going to
Yeah.
be welcoming you and
Hmm.
the type of writing you do because there's so many cool things that we can do in writing and
Yep.
I love getting the opportunity to read things that I would never write.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's just one of those things where like how boring would the world be if we all wrote the same thing? Like,
Really
it's
would be.
great that there are so many different genres and subgenres, and some are silly, and some are serious, and some are real, and some are fantasy. And like, it, I don't understand anybody who puts down somebody else's writing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't either.
Yeah. So there's lots of things that I wish I knew, but like we said in the very beginning, it all led us to this point. And hopefully, you and I will both still have very successful careers. I look at, Taylor Simmons, who is just a freaking powerhouse and incredible and is younger than us and wanna die a little bit inside. But now we have her in our community and we have lots of other wonderful writers in our community. And we're gonna keep building it so that we can learn more stuff.
Yeah, and that does remind me of another point that I want to make is
Mhm.
don't compare your journey to other people's journeys. There are
Oh, but it's so
many
hard not to.
There are so many writers who were much older when their
Yeah.
career started and were incredibly successful. There are people who start when they're really young. There's people who start kind of middle of the road. But just when you start, when you finally start getting those publications, when you get that book deal, that's all that matters.
Yep.
And I think at the end of the day, you have to compare yourself to yourself and your
Hmm.
journey. And you have to
Hmm.
look at it and saying, am I making progress?
Hmm.
Am I happy with the work that I'm doing?
Yep.
And that is really where you need to be because if you're like,
Hmm.
I need to get this done by that, what's going to happen is it's inauthentic. You're going to
Hmm.
burn yourself out. There's all these kinds of things. So you
Yeah.
can't compare your journey to other people's journey
Hmm.
because that's
And
boring. Can you
well,
imagine everybody having the same journey? That's
right.
boring. This is a
It's
story too, Abigail.
it's so boring. And on top of that, you're never going to win. Because if you're looking at somebody being like, oh, well, I'm a lot further than they are, that means you're never going to reach your hand out to them to try to help them along to make that friend. And if you're looking forward, being like, oh, I'm never going to get to where they're going to be, then you're going to be angry and resentful. Like it is a surefire way to isolate yourself
It's a
from
self-fulfilling
everybody who could
prophecy.
help you. Yeah.
Definitely a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think too, like people like Taylor are not like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm so much better because
I
of how
know.
far along I am. Because you know what?
Hmm.
She wouldn't be where she is if she
Hmm.
was spending her time thinking about
Yep.
how much better she is than everyone else. She doesn't need
Exactly.
to think about that. She knows it. No, I'm
Hmm.
just kidding.
No, right? Michael and I have this running joke, like when we see other parents or other couples or whatever, you and Josh being one of them, that we're like, listen, I know they're way better than we are, but like we're doing our best. Um,
What?
like, when you guys will talk about like playing your video games together and like how cute you are, Michael and I are like, yeah, we're not that cute. We're not that good. Like we're okay with that. Or like these other parents, there's a woman that he works with who is one of the single nicest people I've ever met in my life. And she like hand makes like rice, quinoa, veggie, whatever, like chicken nuggets for her son.
Oh my
And
God, I
like
fell
that's
asleep
like
during that
his
sentence.
dude, exactly. And I'm like, she's just better than me. She's just a better mom than I am. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna
don't.
give her those chicken nuggets, you know? So like you can, but have a sense of humor about it. Like
Well, sure,
know
sure.
that,
I don't, again,
you
like,
are exactly where you're supposed to be.
I know you've asked me to be the positive beacon this, and I'm taking this job very seriously
Yeah.
because the thing is,
You're doing amazing.
thanks. The thing is, it's not that, she's a better parent than you. It's just she's got a different skill set than you do. And I'm sure that you're a better parent in other ways.
Um, Yeah, I really like that note to end on of like don't compare yourselves to others because as much as I wish I could go back and tell 16-year-old Abigail all of these helpful hints of what she could do better or different or learn or reach or whatever, I would still be comparing myself to others when I was, that age.
Hmm.
Um, so I think you're doing a great job being the positive beacon in this
I'm
episode
trying.
because this could have gone really sad really
It could have
fast of
gotten
like
real
all the
sad.
things we did wrong.
No, but I do think that that's the most important thing is everybody
Mhm.
has a writing journey and it looks completely different. And I would not be the
Yeah.
writer I am today had I not gone through all the different steps I
Hmm.
went to. I don't know what I'd be writing. I don't even know if I would be writing if
Yeah.
like, it's the butterfly
Hmm.
effect in, what's a Ray Bradbury short story, by the way, that where
Oh,
we've
it's
learned
such a
about
good
that.
short story. I've read
Yes,
that
it
one.
is. Anyway,
It's so good. Yeah.
I think that's what made me fall in love with sci-fi writing and specifically that short story.
It's
I think it's called A Sound
fantastic.
of Thunder. Is that right?
I think so. I'm pretty sure.
Anyway,
I just liked it because it was time travel.
yes, that too.
Yep.
So I
Yeah.
think that's something to remind yourself that
Hmm.
you may not go where you think you're going to go, but you'll end up where you
Hmm.
need to be.
Yeah.
Which I
Yeah.
actually think is a paraphrase of a Douglas Adams quote.
Nice. You're such a nerd. It's great. I love it. All right. Is there anything else that you wish you had known?
I mean, I think the biggest thing for me to learn is that I wish I'd known that I am a writer.
Hmm.
I think I questioned that for a very long time. I just wish somebody really had sat me down and went, "No, you really are a writer." And it's not
Hmm.
that nobody told me that. I have plenty of people who told me
Yeah.
that, but like I really needed somebody to like get it through my thick skull. Like, no, you're
Yeah.
not. You really are a writer. You write all the time. You love writing. Why
Yep.
would you not think you're a writer? But it
Yeah.
felt like I had to hit certain, like I had to be
Hmm.
a published author in order to consider
Right.
myself a writer. And that's
Yeah.
not true.
Which is hilarious because you don't just become a published author overnight. You have to write to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's still
Yeah.
something I struggle with. Like, I'm a
Hmm.
writer.
Yeah.
I am. I do. I write
Mhm.
every day.
Yep. Yep.
What about you?
Um, I think the biggest thing I wish I had known was how to make friends. And that goes for undergrad, that goes for grad school. Even though we joke about like, I trapped you into being my friend, um, it was I mean, 2 years later. So we met in 2018, and it wasn't until 2020 when the program shut down that I like reached out to you
Mhm.
and tried to become friends with you. And I wish that I had more confidence in the value of my own friendship because I think that that's something that really could have helped me along the way is to actually build a writing community around myself. But I always just felt like I was being annoying.
Yeah. I also have that feeling of I'm probably being annoying all the time. everywhere.
That yeah was such a like, yeah, you are
Yeah,
really
you are really
annoying.
annoying. No, no, it was more of a yeah, I feel that because I
Yeah.
definitely am always like, oh, I'm just annoying. People,
Hmm.
they're too busy. They don't want to talk to me.
Yeah.
Again, it's that self-rejection
Yeah.
for it.
Like I wish that I had been more open about what I wanted
Yeah.
when it came to that writing group and that writing community.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. But now we're here
Now we're
and we
here.
started
We've
a
made it.
podcast. The
Yeah.
thing I wish I'd known sooner is that you and I were going to have a great podcast and that we should have started this when we first met.
Yeah, I know, for real. I mean,
Right?
we had lots of conversations about, oh, we
We
could do
did.
like a little video series where we do like little
Hmm.
lectures. And so I think
Yeah.
it was always
Yeah,
brewing in the back of our heads until.
definitely. Just anything to get to hang out together. I'm Abigail.
And I'm Maddie, and this has been
Two writers.
Many Wrongs.